Some reflections show more than they should, and some wishes come with a price that compounds interest every single day. Liam Chin had always been the kind of kid who ate lunch alone, walked home alone, and spent Friday nights scrolling through his phone while his classmates posted stories from parties he'd never be invited to. The title read, Ancient Ritual to Cure Loneliness to 100% Success Rate. He almost scrolled past it, but something about the replies caught his attention. Person after person claiming it had worked, that they'd never been alone again after performing it. At 17, loneliness had become his constant companion, so familiar that he'd started talking to himself just to fill the silence of his bedroom. Speak the words, I offer my solitude to whoever will take it. Let me never be alone again. Light the candle, look into the mirror, and make the request 3 times. As he spoke the final words, the streetlight above him flickered once, then died completely. Following the instructions, he walked home without glancing back, though he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him go. In the sudden darkness, the candle flame seemed impossibly bright. It wasn't until he was brushing his teeth that he noticed it, a shadow in the bathroom mirror that didn't quite match his own movements. He turned around, but nothing was there. When he looked back at the mirror, his reflection was normal. It was definitely human-like, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin, with arms that seemed to hang too low. And it was always smiling, but the figure was getting clearer each day. What had started as a vague shadow was becoming more defined, more real, and it was getting closer. Even though Liam couldn't make out any features clearly, he could feel that awful smile radiating from the reflection. Gaunt cheeks, hollow eyes, and that terrible smile that stretched too wide. It stood maybe 5 feet behind him in every reflection, its head tilted slightly to one side as if studying him with curious amusement. The entire thread was gone, as if it had never existed. He was sure he'd closed it before bed. As he moved to shut it, he caught sight of his reflection in the glass. His searches turned up nothing useful, just vague warnings about Crossroads magic and deals with thin places. Close enough that he could make out the threadbare suit it wore, the way its fingers seemed to end in points rather than normal fingernails. Then blow out the candle and leave without looking back. When he finally worked up the courage to look again, the thing was gone from the reflection. He threw a blanket over the mirror, but the whispering continued until dawn. But he could feel it somehow, a presence that made the air in his room feel thick and wrong, and technically, he wasn't. So much worse. The thing was always there, always watching, always smiling that awful smile. It was during one of these solitary conversations, sometime around midnight on a Thursday in October, that Liam stumbled across the forum post. The thing appeared in car windows as he walked by, in storefront glass, even in puddles on the sidewalk, always smiling, always getting closer. The instructions were simple enough. Go to the nearest Crossroads at 3 a.m. Bring a mirror and a candle. He would never be alone again. The Crossroads, where Elm met Birch Street, was nothing special. Just 2 suburban roads intersecting under a flickering streetlight. It was getting more solid, more real. And yesterday, for just a moment, he could have sworn he saw his own reflection smile back at him with someone else's teeth. And in the reflection of his phone screen, and in the surface of his bedroom window at night, always the same thing, tall, thin shadow, standing just behind him, slightly to the left. When he'd spin around, there was never anyone there. The candle flame danced in the slight breeze as he held up the mirror, catching glimpses of his own nervous face in the reflection. The words seemed to hang in the air longer than they should have. Let me never be alone again. But at this hour, with fog rolling in from the nearby woods, it felt different, older somehow. Liam laughed at first. It was ridiculous. But as the days passed and the silence in his house grew heavier, the idea began to gnaw at him. What did he have to lose? His non-existent social life. The following Saturday, he found himself walking down Elm Street at 2:47 a.m., his compact mirror and a white candle tucked into his jacket pocket. Liam knelt at the center of the intersection, his knees pressing against the cold asphalt. "I offer my solitude to whoever will take it," he whispered, feeling foolish. He repeated the phrase 3 times, each repetition growing more confident. Liam blew out the candle and stood, pocketing the mirror without looking into it again. The next morning, he'd almost forgotten about the ritual entirely. Probably just tired, he told himself. He'd been up late, after all, but it happened again in the hallway mirror at school. By the 3rd day, the shadow had begun to take shape. He tried to convince himself it was his imagination, stress from junior year, anything but the truth. On the 4th day, Liam could make out the thing's face. By the end of the week, it was only 3 feet away. Liam stopped using mirrors altogether. He brushed his teeth with his eyes closed, avoided reflective surfaces, and kept his phone face down. But it didn't matter. He tried researching how to reverse the ritual, but the forum post had vanished. 2 weeks after the ritual, Liam woke up to find his bedroom window open, cold October air streaming in. The figure was right behind him now, close enough that he could see the yellowed teeth in its too wide grin. Liam slammed the window shut and pressed his back against it, breathing hard. That night, he heard whispers coming from his mirror, soft, sibilant sounds that might have been words in a language he didn't recognize. The next morning, dark circles under his eyes. Liam realized the horrible truth. He'd asked to never be alone again. But it was worse than loneliness. Because now, 3 weeks after the ritual, when Liam looked into mirrors, he could see that the figure wasn't just getting closer. The ritual had worked exactly as promised, but he was beginning to understand that some things are infinitely worse than solitude. Mark could feel his heart stopping a little more each day, while the son's eyes grew brighter with something that wasn't quite human. Mark Henderson had always been a man of science. As a mechanical engineer, he believed in logic, formulas, and solutions that could be measured and proven. That faith was shattered on a Tuesday morning in October when Dr. Martinez delivered news that no parent should ever hear. "I'm sorry, Mark." Tommy was in the pediatric ward down the hall, probably asking the nurses when his dad would be back with the promised chocolate pudding. Sarah, his ex-wife, had already made it clear she blamed him for Tommy's condition. If you hadn't exposed him to all those chemicals in your garage, she'd screamed during their last argument. If you'd been more careful. The guilt was a weight in his chest that made it hard to breathe. But as he sat there in the fog, watching wisps of mist curl around his headlights, desperation made him do something he would have mocked just hours earlier. The fog seemed to thicken around him, and the air grew colder despite the warm night. But if there's something out there, if there's anyone who can help, it's tall, impossibly thin, with eyes that reflected the moonlight like an animal's. But when he blinked, there was nothing there except the sound of his own rapid breathing. "I'll give anything to save my son." Anything. The drive home was a blur of self-recrimination and exhaustion. He felt foolish, but the image of Tommy's pale face in that hospital bed drove him forward. Tommy's latest scans showed the tumors had shrunk by 60%. Lines around his eyes that seemed to deepen by the day. The 7-year-old's face was red with fury, but his eyes. He asked Sarah during one of their custody exchanges. His eyes were luminous, almost pulsing with golden light. Mark blinked, and they were normal again. Mark told himself it was stress, the aftermath of the most terrifying period of his life. His hands developed a tremor that made precise work impossible. His teachers remarked on his incredible energy, his sharp intelligence, his almost supernatural ability to sense when other children were lying or hiding something. But Mark noticed other things too. The way small animals would flee when Tommy approached. How plants in his room would wither and die despite adequate care. The cold spots that seemed to follow the boy wherever he went. But Mark could feel the cold radiating from the boy's small body. and he knew that whatever was wearing his son's face was only getting hungrier. Some mornings, he woke up feeling like he'd run a marathon, his body aching in ways that spoke of deep, fundamental exhaustion. The thing that had saved his son's life was patient, but Mark could feel its growing appetite in the way Tommy's embraces left him breathless, in the way the boy's laughter seemed to echo from somewhere far deeper than a 7-year-old's throat. Instead, he felt a growing unease that he couldn't name. Within 2 weeks, they had disappeared entirely. The medical team called it a miracle, an unprecedented case of spontaneous remission that would be studied for years. Something ancient and hungry. Are you okay? The Crossroads had answered his prayer, but the price wasn't just his life force being slowly drained away. Something else was growing inside his son, feeding on Mark's essence, becoming stronger with each passing day. Mark was watching from the doorway, noting how pale and gaunt his own reflection looked in the window. When Tommy became frustrated with a broken tank, the boy had no idea that his small body was betraying him, that cancer was eating him alive from the inside. But this time, Mark felt something inside his chest lurch like a fishhook pulling at his heart. He gasped, doubling over, and when he looked up, Tommy was staring at him with those glowing eyes, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The tumor is aggressive and has spread further than we initially thought. The oncologist's voice seemed to echo from somewhere far away. With treatment, we might buy Tommy 6 months. Maybe 8, if we're lucky. Mark stared at the x-rays on the wall, the ghostly images of his 7-year-old son's chest cavity dotted with dark spots like a constellation of death. That night, Mark sat in his truck outside the hospital, his hands gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He drove aimlessly through the countryside, tears blurring his vision. But now, especially when he was angry or frustrated, they seemed to glow with an inner light. Not blue anymore, but something closer to amber, like the eyes of a predator caught in headlights. The October night was unusually warm, and a thick fog had settled over the rural roads, places where the world grows thin, where desperate souls can make ... arrangements. Mark found himself on a stretch of highway he didn't recognize, where 4 dirt roads converged in a perfect cross. He pulled over, his engine ticking in the silence, and that's when he remembered his grandmother's stories. Crossroads, she used to whisper when he was Tommy's age, her weathered hands gesturing in the dim light of her kitchen. Mark laughed bitterly at the memory. He was a man of science, not superstition. He stepped out of the truck and walked to the center of the crossroads. "I don't know if anyone's listening," he said to the darkness, his voice barely above a whisper. The fog swirled, and for a moment, Mark could have sworn he saw a figure standing at the edge of the crossroads. He waited for 10 minutes, feeling increasingly ridiculous, before returning to his truck. 3 days later, Dr. Martinez called with news that defied medical explanation. Mark should have been elated. It started with small things, persistent fatigue that no amount of sleep could cure, gray hairs appearing overnight. But then there were Tommy's eyes. The boy had always had bright blue eyes, just like his mother. The first time Mark noticed it, Tommy was having a tantrum about bedtime. "Did you see that?" "See what?" she replied. But Mark caught her unconsciously stepping back from Tommy, her maternal instincts sensing something wrong. As the months passed, Mark's decline accelerated. Kay lost weight despite eating normally. Tommy, meanwhile, grew stronger and more vibrant than ever. The truth crystallized on a winter evening when Tommy was playing with his toy soldiers. "I hate this stupid thing," Tommy shouted, and his eyes blazed with that golden light. "Daddy." Tommy's voice was his own, but underneath it, Mark heard something else. Mark forced himself to nod, but he understood now. Tommy's eyes returned to normal, and he ran to hug his father with genuine concern. As he held Tommy close, Mark wondered how long he had left, and more terrifyingly, what would happen when there was nothing left of him to feed it. Mark had gotten his wish. Tommy would live. The question was, what would be left of his son when Mark finally had nothing more to give? Some mirrors show you more than just your reflection. They show you what you've lost. Anna had always been invisible. Not literally, of course, but in every way that mattered. 4 dirt paths converging in a perfect X, marked by an ancient oak tree whose branches twisted toward the sky like arthritic fingers. Local folklore claimed it was a place where desperate souls could make bargains with things that should unexist. Anna had heard the stories her whole life, whispered tales of farmers trading their souls for good harvests, of lonely widows seeking to speak with their dead husbands one last time. At 22, she moved through the world like a ghost, her mousy brown hair falling across her face like a curtain she could hide behind. Her co-workers barely acknowledged her presence at the insurance office. Men looked through her on the street. Even her own mother had once sighed and said, "Well, at least you have a sweet personality." The Crossroads had always been there, just outside her small town of Millbrook. She'd never believed them, not until that October night when she stood at her bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection with tears streaming down her plain face. She'd been rejected again. This time by David from accounting, who'd laughed when she'd finally worked up the courage to ask him to coffee. "I don't really date, ... you know. Girls like you," he'd said, his eyes not even meeting hers. The walk to the Crossroads felt like a dream. The October air bit at her skin, and her footsteps crunched on fallen leaves. She arrived at midnight, just as the old stories said she should. For a moment, she wondered if it had all been a dream. Then she stumbled to the bathroom mirror and gasped. The oak tree loomed above her, its shadow stretching across the intersection like a giant spider. Her ordinary features had been sculpted into something that belonged on magazine covers. She was beautiful, breathtakingly, impossibly beautiful. "I want to be beautiful," she whispered to the darkness. "I want people to notice me. I want to matter." She bought new clothes, styled her hair, and marveled at how the world had suddenly opened up to her. She twisted in front of her bathroom mirror, trying to see what was bothering her. What she saw made her blood run cold. She felt like she was finally alive. The wound was healed, but fresh, as if it had been made just days ago. Anna tried closing her windows, wearing earplugs, even staying in a hotel across town. Nothing worked. The sound followed her everywhere, a constant reminder that her beauty had come at a cost she was only beginning to understand. She had no memory of any surgery, no explanation for how it had gotten there. But sometimes, when she wasn't looking directly at the mirror, she could swear she saw something else. The most recent disappearance had been 5 years ago. A woman named Sarah Chin, who'd returned home beautiful beyond description. She'd been found dead exactly 11 months later, her body discovered at the Crossroads with her spine cut open and something precious missing from inside. What she found made her sick. Over the past century, dozens of people had gone missing from Millbrook, and it wasn't just one voice. It was dozens, maybe hundreds, all crying out in perfect harmony. The voices were clearer now, and she could make out words. They'd all been last seen heading toward the Crossroads. They'd all been found days later, wandering back into town with no memory of where they'd been, but they'd all been changed. The thing at the Crossroads didn't just grant wishes, it collected them. The stitches in her back had begun to itch again, and she could feel something moving beneath her skin. Soon, she knew the thing would come to collect what it was owed. Soon, she would join the voices beneath the tree. And in the distance, she could swear she heard something else. The sound of the thing at the Crossroads, laughing like autumn leaves in a gathering storm. Every person who'd made a deal had given up something essential, something that made them human. Their souls, their memories, their capacity for genuine connection. All of it was buried here, beneath the ancient oak, whimpering in the darkness. Some made beautiful, others made wealthy, some given talents they'd never possessed. And she was beginning to understand that some prices are too high to pay, no matter how desperately you want what's being offered. Swallowed the sound through the darkness, her feet carrying her automatically toward the crossroads. The oak tree stood silhouetted against the starless sky, its branches reaching toward her like beckoning arms. A shadow behind her eyes, a hollowness where something vital should have been. Her coworkers, who'd barely spoken to her before, suddenly wanted to be her friend. Strangers stopped her on the street just to compliment her appearance. The wind died, kids fell silent, and something in the shadows beneath the oak began to move. It never showed itself fully, just glimpses of something tall and angular with too many joints in its limbs. She told herself it was just the wind, but deep down, she knew better. The sound was human. It was desperate. It was calling her name. When it spoke, its voice was like autumn leaves scraping against concrete. Beauty, it rasped, such a small thing to ask for, such a simple trade. Trade, Anna's voice cracked. What do you want? Nothing you'll miss, the thing replied. Nothing you'll remember giving. Anna felt something cold brush against her hand. Not quite fingers, not quite claws. Do we have a deal? Desperation made her bold. Yes. The last thing she remembered was the sound of something sharp cutting through the air. She woke up in her own bed the next morning, sunlight streaming through her curtains. Staring back at her was perfection. Her plain brown hair had become lustrous chestnut waves. Curd dull eyes now sparkled like emeralds. The change was immediate and overwhelming. David from accounting asked her out before she'd even made it to her desk. For 3 days, Anna lived in a dream. On the 4th night, she felt an itch between her shoulder blades. A long, precise incision ran down her spine, held together by neat, black stitches. That night, she heard the first whisper. It came from the direction of the crossroads, a faint, pained whimper that drifted through her bedroom window. The whimpering returned every night, growing louder and more insistent. A week after the crossroads, Anna's reflection began to change. Not her face. That remained perfect. She started researching the crossroads, digging through old newspaper archives and local historical records. And they'd all died within a year, their bodies found with the same long incision down their spine. Anna's hands shook as she read the last article. The coroner had been unable to determine what had been taken. That night, Anna couldn't ignore the whimpering anymore. As she approached, the whimpering grew clearer. It was coming from beneath the tree, from somewhere deep underground. Anna knelt beside the gnarled roots and pressed her ear to the earth. Give it back, they pleaded. Give us back what you took. Anna understood then. Anna stood up slowly, her perfect face wet with tears. But for now, she was beautiful. For now, people noticed her. For now, she mattered, even if she was no longer sure what she really meant anymore. As Anna walked back toward town, she could hear the whimpering following her, growing fainter with each step, but never quite disappearing. The mirror in her bathroom reflected her perfect face, but Anna knew that somewhere beneath the earth, her real self was crying out to be set free. Some mirrors show you more than just your reflection. They show you what you've lost and what you can never get back. And with that final story, we pull back from the abyss. For now, tales of ordinary lives brushing against the extraordinary, the terrifying, the unexplainable, from the shadow that mimics to the voice that calls from an empty house. We've seen tonight how thin the veil between our reality and a much darker one can be. These stories are not just fiction. They are born from real experiences, whispered in hushed tones, and shared to remind us that we are not always alone. And that's the most chilling thought, isn't it? Perhaps one of tonight's stories reminded you of something that happened to you, or to someone you know. A strange occurrence you've tried to forget. A noise in the night you rationalized away. A figure you saw for just a second. The details of your own brush with the darkness are what give this channel life. I invite you to leave your own story in the comments below. Let us know what you've seen in the shadows. If these stories sent a shiver down your spine, show your support by hitting that like button. It helps these tales reach others who need a reminder to check their locks at night. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell. We have so many more stories to share, and you won't want to be left in the dark. Until next time, remember that you are not afraid of being alone. You are afraid of the bone-deep certainty that you are not.